TGIF. It is the Friday edition of Weather for Weather Geeks, the last Weather Geeks video for the month of June. June's going out on a very hot note, of course, and that's what's going to dominate our conversation this evening, the hot weather for the weekend and right into the first full week of July next week. First, let's do a quick review of where we've been so far in June. In the precipitation category, it has been a wet June. In fact, the 7th wettest June on record here in Youngstown. Thursdays have kind of been the dry day of the month. We had 3 consecutive dry Thursdays before we had a little bit of precipitation overnight, Wednesday night into Thursday morning this week. But otherwise, Thursday's kind of been the pick day of the month. Tuesdays have been pretty soggy. Saturdays and Sundays have actually been pretty soggy. Not great news for the weekends so far in the month of June. That's the story in terms of precipitation. A significant June, rain-wise. The temperature story, not as significant. This isn't a real big departure from average, although the number will certainly rise as we ring out the month tomorrow. 1.9 degrees above average through the first 29 days of the month. We've had kind of a half and half month as far as cooler than average days and warmer than average days. It's been much closer to average, certainly, than the very chilly April we had, and then the record warm May that we had. So this month has been a little more typical of the season. All right, today we did 88 at the airport. Our forecast was 89, so we were pretty close to the mark on that. This promises, I should say, to be the coolest day of the next 7, unless we get a thunderstorm or two that comes through early in the afternoon at some point next week and stops our temperature rise for the day. That's an outside possibility, but our current forecast suggests that this will be the coolest temperature for a high we have until maybe next weekend. Now, dew points today mixed out somewhat nicely. I mean, we saw upper 60s right around noon, but then we've had mid-60s for the rest of the afternoon. Yeah, that's muggy, but it's not tropical. It's tolerable. I do think the dew points are going to be more of a story by the end of the weekend. Current temperatures as of 7:13 this evening, well up into the 80s here locally. Minneapolis was 99 for high today, same in Omaha, and they're still well up into the 90s this evening. 93 in St. Louis and 97 in Dallas. Phoenix, hot, yes, but by Phoenix standards, 102 is it's not bad for 5:13 in the evening on almost the final day of June. All right, excessive heat warnings in effect for places such as Chicago and Fort Wayne and heading up towards Detroit and Grand Rapids. Closer to home, we have issued by the Cleveland Weather Service, we have a heat advisory out for Mahoning County, Trumbull County. Pittsburgh did not issue any sort of heat advisory as of yet. They may, particularly for Sunday, but it doesn't matter. This is just a technicality, really. Conditions are going to be the same everywhere, whether you live in Mercer County, Columbiana County, or Trumbull or Mahoning counties. It's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. You got to take precautions everywhere as we go into the weekend. So here's a look at one model's depiction of the heat index values for the next several days. Now, a couple of caveats here. This is one of run model. The model dew points on this model, I'm showing you the GFS here, and the GFS tends to overdo the dew points just a little bit, and that leads to somewhat artificially high heat indices at times. But even if these are off by a couple, they're not off by much, and it's going to be really hot for the next several days. If we get a couple of cooling thunderstorms next week in the afternoon, it'll knock the numbers down, but peak heat indices should be well up into the 90s, if not knocking on the door of 100 all the way through at least the middle of the week, if not the end of next week. So the heat index, kind of like the wind chill in the winter, this is the apparent temperature to the human body. We cool ourselves off when it's hot by sweating. That sweat then evaporates, and that evaporative cooling is what regulates our body temperature. It's kind of the same idea as air conditioning. It's evaporating water to cool down the air, and that's how we cool off. But it just doesn't work as well when it's really humid. That sweat does not evaporate as efficiently. And when you have heat index values of 90 to 103, heat cramps become a possibility. Anyone working outside, exerting themselves outside, if you're not staying hydrated enough, even people who are in pretty good shape can have problems with, at the very least, heat cramps, if not worse, when we get this kind of heat and humidity. Here's a look at our temperature forecast for the next 7 days. I've got 95 as the high mark on Sunday. And even if we fall a little short of that Monday through Thursday, it's only going to be by a couple of degrees. And again, the caveat being these numbers might be a little high a couple of these days only if you get a couple of thunderstorms in the afternoon hours. That's a possibility. But assuming there are no thunderstorms over your location or where we verify our forecast at the Youngstown Warren Airport, we should have no problem reaching these temperatures later this week. All right, so it's a heat wave when we have 3 consecutive days of 90-degree plus temperatures. When's the last time we had heat waves of a certain length? Well, the last official heat wave of 3 days was back in July of 2013. We had 4 in a row in 2011, and then when you hit 5 in a row, you've got to go back to 1991. 6 in a row occurred in 1995, and our heat wave of 7 days occurred last in 1988 during that extremely hot summer that many remember back in 1988. Our current forecast is for 6, starting tomorrow, taking us through next Thursday, but my forecast for next Friday is 89. So it's not like it's out of the realm of possibility that we hit 90 next Friday. If so, that would make it 7, and that would put us in the category of, the first 7-day stretch since 1988. Our longest stretch of 90-degree plus temperatures on record was back in 1940, July 19th through the 31st. We had 90-degree temperatures here in Youngstown. A lot of these records, again, pretty old. A lot of our really hot temperature records are back from the 30s and 40s and even parts of the 50s. But 1988, a banner year. 1995 was a very hot summer. And 2012 was a very hot summer, but it's interesting, in 2012 we didn't have an official heat wave. We had a lot of hot days, but it was hard to string together more than a couple in a row. We had a lot of days in the upper 80s, certainly, but it was hard to string together more than a couple of 90-degree days in a row back in that very hot summer of 2012. All right, 4th of July forecast. What else is new? It's going to be hot. And if you plan on shooting off some fireworks or taking in the fireworks, including here in downtown Youngstown on Wednesday, just be prepared for the heat. It's probably going to be hazy. I would expect that these the smoke from these fireworks will not travel very far. We're not going to have much in the way of a breeze probably. And during the day, hot weather. I've got a low chance of pop-up thunderstorms midday and afternoon. Probably no better than 20, at most 30%. So that's the 4th of July forecast for now, and beyond that, here's a look at the European model temperature anomalies beyond the holiday. Stays pretty hot into the second half of next week. Now, a little bit of a cool down skirting by the northeastern U.S. late in the work week, and especially next weekend. That'll knock our temperatures down some, but it's probably at coolest average, and it's possible it stays above average by a couple of degrees, but it won't be in the 90s for next weekend. It looks that way anyway. Beyond that, above average temperatures likely to continue through at least the 10th. As we go towards the middle of the month, and especially beyond the 15th, still some pretty good agreement on the modeling that we're going to see a pattern switch here. The Pacific Northwest is really going to heat up, and when the Pacific Northwest heats up, typically that means cooler weather comes towards the Great Lakes and the Northeast, and so we've got some reasonable amounts of confidence that the pattern will change to a much more tolerable one during the second half of July, but I'll tell you, the first half of July looks really, really toasty. All right, stay cool. Have a good weekend, everyone. I'll see you back here on Monday for a fresh edition of Weather for Weather Geeks.